Are you gonna MC for us?
Huh?
Are you gonna be the MC?
I mean, I just want to say, hey, Rap, I'm for you to pick it up.
That works. Yeah. So, just real quick. So, I think this is the first one of this year, obviously, that we're having this user group. It's a Midwest chapter. And there was a time where one of the last agencies that I worked at it was for ICF Next. We hosted about 3 or 4 of the user group meetings in AEM as well. But obviously that was during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So we never really got into an in-person event. So this is fantastic. I'm really glad to see, some people I've worked with before. This is, with colleagues and partners. So this is a really good thing to experience here. So just wanted to, start off with that. So welcome.
Bring it back.
Yeah, thank you.
Ron, is our goal to do these quarterly?
I think we should probably do these quarterly. If not, let's see how it kind of plays out. I think there's never a situation where we're running out of topics, right? We're going to talk about edge delivery services today, but another hot topic that I've heard about quite a bit too is generative AI. That's also getting integrated with AEM and edge delivery services. So what's that all about, right? So I think that's something that would be fun. Another one is commerce. Another one is content supply chain. So I think there's a lot of good topics that we can cover in part of these meetings and kind of go through what people's experiences have been with building some of these out. Okay, so I'm going to start presenting the deck here. So give me just a second.
Just for everyone in the room and those folks that are online, feedback is important to us. It's for hosting these types of events. So if there are topics, one, let us know if in person and virtual is a working format. 2, if there are topics you'd like to see or hear us speak of, let us know. Love to address that as a part of, kind of a good member of the Adobe community.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about demystifying edge delivery services. Okay, so the agenda of what we're going to go through here is what is it? What is edge delivery services all about? I'm also going to talk a little bit about what it's not, why you should consider edge delivery services when you're building out your content experiences. There's really 3 main areas to this that that's something that Adobe came up with, which I think is sort of key here. Site performance, building out really fast websites and performing pages and experiences. How easy and simplified they've made the authoring in edge delivery services, and then how easy they've made it to develop in edge delivery services. I'll get into a little bit more and I'll tell you a story about my son who's in college. I actually got him working and developing in edge delivery services for my daughter who's working on some interior design stuff. So he actually worked on that for the summer. So pretty fun, that they're actually making it available and the developer resource pool has expanded quite a bit with edge delivery services. Whereas in something like AEM, you've needed to know Sitely, OSGI configurations, all about what sling models are. So there's quite a bit of different sort of technologies that you have to know to work in something like AEM. There's a bit of ramp up, but with edge delivery services, that's much more simplified. We'll talk about some of the things that we learned as part of our experience in building out some of the different edge delivery service sites. So we built out a couple of sites that also integrate with commerce. And we've also taken a look at a couple of the other projects that Adobe has been working on, like Project Dark Alley and Project Crosswalk, which let you do a couple different things in terms of authoring and AEM as a cloud service with the universal editor, and also with something like SharePoint. And then I'll talk about a couple of additional topics, kind of what's on the roadmap from Adobe, and then a couple of resources if you're interested to either develop in there, and depending on what your persona is, if you're in marketing, if you're in IT management, if you're consulting, there's a couple of different resources that I've got for you. Okay, so I will continue. What is edge delivery services? So you've probably heard a couple of different terms that's been used for edge delivery services as well. Even before it was called Project Franklin. So this is going back to, I think, February-ish of last year. It was called Helix, and then it became around, I think, Adobe's Summit of last year, it became Next Gen Composability, right? And we called it NGC, and we still use NGC in some of our content repositories. But now they're calling it edge delivery services or just edge delivery for short. And edge delivery services is part of AEM as a cloud service, but they are working on making it work on AEM 6.5 as well. So just a note that there's going to be more and more feature parity coming with that. And the way that Adobe describes it is that it's a new set of composable services, and Adobe Experience Manager is a cloud service, and they help you deliver exceptional experiences for driving engagement and conversion. So it's part of AEM. It's not a replacement. Okay. So it's something to complement AEM as a cloud service.
Got a quick question. Is it okay?
Yeah, you can ask a question actually, and I want this to be interactive, and I'll repeat the question for the people on the phone too.
So where it says, is it commerce, they mean like commerce integration framework in AEM or Adobe Commerce / Magento?
It's Adobe Commerce, and it's Adobe Commerce proper, right? So the question was, is the add-on available for Commerce in as AEM,
In AEM.
the SIF in AEM, or Adobe Commerce? And my understanding is that it's an add-on for Adobe Commerce. Okay, so what is edge delivery services? And as mentioned, I was going to talk about what it's not, right? Is it a CDN? Well, not exactly. It actually complements the CDN that you have. You can bring your own CDN. You can bring your own web, which is the the web application firewall. You can use your own DNS. So you can use your existing technologies. And what it will do is it will basically augment your existing CDN to make your fast experiences. It's not meant to replace it, although AEM as a cloud service technically uses Fastly behind the scenes. I don't want to get too technical either, just, don't want to lose everybody here. But it does use Fastly behind the scenes. And again, you can bring your own CDN with edge delivery services. Is it editing in Word? I think there's been some confusion about what edge delivery service is too, because a lot of times, and a lot of the use cases that it accounts for is document-based authoring, right? So, okay, I can go into Word, I can go into Google Docs, and I can work on my website, but that's not exactly what it only does. It's one of the content sources. So with edge delivery services, you can work with AEM, and I'm going to demonstrate that. And when we get into authoring, you can author in the Microsoft applications. You can work in Google Docs. You can use GitHub. You can use other content sources, right? So those all can be delivered and rendered on edge delivery services. This is just a little bit of a different view that we have in edge delivery services. So as you can see, you got your own front end that you can use to render your experiences. Maybe you're using AEM in the headless fashion where you're using a content fragment, right? And you use a content fragment editor. You can be also on AEM in a headful implementation, and that's where you can make use of edge delivery services by making use of the universal editor. And I'm going to show that to you as well. Underlying, you have that same content repository service, right? So with Project Crosswalk, that's where you're using the universal editor, and then you can have edge delivery services delivering those experiences. Then, as I mentioned before, you've also got your document-based authoring. So that's where you've got Microsoft Word, you've got your Google Docs, you got your items in SharePoint, and then you can author in those, and with extensions, you can deliver those on edge delivery services. So there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of work with how that's architected. Okay. So as I was talking about a little bit before, there's three main areas that I wanted to get into in terms of the focus for edge delivery services. The first one is performance first, right? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to build out excellent experiences. They're really high in SEO rankings. You're getting more conversions, right? So from a development perspective, you're trying to get that 100 on a Google Lighthouse score, which you can do pretty quickly, and your boilerplate content lets you do that. But ultimately, what you want to do is you want to get better experiences, faster experiences, and you want to get more conversions, right? The other thing I talked about was that you want to improve the authoring experience. So with authoring, you don't have to ramp up and you don't have to get people trained on working in something like AEM. There may be some cases where you have to use specific AEM functionality like launches or something like multi-site manager for things like translations. But Adobe is going in the direction of providing more and more feature parity with this. And then rapid development, as I mentioned before. You want to get developers working with edge delivery services. It's full stack friendly. It supports content and code separation, and you've got less specialized development needs, right? Again, you don't have to have everybody knowing OSGI and Sling models and HTL and all these different sort of concerns, right? You got DevOps, you've got front end, you got back end. There's a lot of different pieces that are part of AEM. So edge delivery services tends to simplify that a bit and make it really fast. And think about also pipelines, right? In AEM or even AEM as a cloud service, a build can take hours, right? But when you're in edge delivery services, it's a couple of seconds, right? You're doing a commit in GitHub and then it's out there on the site. You push a button in Google Docs and it's live on the site. So it's very simplified. It's very fast to get your content out to market, which is key. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about site performance. So obviously you want to have your high availability. So you're getting a really good high cache ratio when you're working on edge delivery services. So depending on where the users are, they're getting a really fast experience. They also are making a lot of use of core web vitals. So this is a different way to measure site performance, and they do that by doing what's called phase content rendering. So that phase content rendering basically takes care of making the most optimal rendition of your content when a user is experiencing it on the edge. There's automated testing that's built in, and then you also have proactive monitoring. So they have something which is called real use monitoring, where you can actually go out and you can see what the behavior is of your site performance, essentially in real time. So a couple of examples here that you can see too for when people launch with edge delivery services, right? So you can see some of the times here as well. So let me just go over here to the times. 1.2 seconds that it gets to, whereas before they went live, it was over 2 up to 4 seconds, right? Continuing performance here, you got almost 3 seconds, and then now ever since they went live with edge delivery services, you're at less than a second. Same thing over here with Sunstar. They went down to less than a couple of seconds. So really excellent performance, and that's sort of the key and focus of edge delivery services for some of these sites. And there's a list of clients that are using it as well. Edge delivery. There's a number of different references that you can use to see the site performance for some of these. Okay. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about was authoring. So focus on simplification of that authoring. So there's a video that's going to be playing in here, but basically what I wanted to show in this video, and if we want to, we can dive into this after we go through the presentation, because I do have some of these available if we want to get into a specific area, like, hey, how do I work with a specific component? How do I work with images? What's my integration with assets look like? So we can get into that. But the idea here is the common use case, which is the document-based editing. So here you can use your Microsoft Word, you can use Google Docs. You have an extension which is in your browser, which lets you modify that content and publish it and preview it very quickly. And it's also an extensible extension, meaning that you can add additional buttons on there to do different kinds of features, things like integrate with generating your variations or accessing your assets, which is on cloud. Basically, people know how to work in Word and Google Docs, right? So there's really no onboarding to do it. They just have to learn a little bit about what the block structure looks like, and then they can start working in there. Okay, so this video should start. Let's see. It's gone. Okay. I know it might be a little bit hard to see. It's a little bit small, but I think the people who are on the team should be able to see it. So there's an extension that comes up. And then with that extension, let's just say that you go in and you want to make a change to something very simple, like a text change on the page. So when you edit this and you hit edit, it goes to Google Docs. And this is the block that I was talking about, the block structure. Basically, the blocks tie with a CSS variable. Again, don't want to get too technical, but there's blocks that are in here, and those blocks drive what that what the content needs to do. What kind of applications need to happen for its rendering. So now when you're previewing it, it's actually sending it out to the edge. And now we're seeing the site as if it were live, right? So this right here is a preview. So very simple use cases. You're in the documents, you're previewing. Next thing you want to do is you want to publish it. Now the document's live. I mean, that took a few seconds, right? There was no lengthy kind of workflow that you had to go through, a simple extension. So very, very simplified authoring. So the next thing that you probably want to do is you want to check and make sure that it, you don't have to do this for every page, obviously. You can do this with the RUM, but you want to run this through Google Lighthouse, and then let's see what the score is for this page.
Did this page have client side rendered components in React or something that would be better through Edge versus if they were server-side rendered? What is Edge giving you in performance that you wouldn't have gotten from a fully baked server-side change?
So the question is, what are you getting in edge delivery that you wouldn't get from server-side rendering, right? So this right here, actually behind the scenes is sending MD files. So it generates markdown files and it sends those out to the edge. And those rendered files are then what are cached. And then that's what, I mean, obviously we're seeing this right here from, a video, but when I put the video together, I was sitting at a place where it was really fast, fast internet, right? But what if this right here were to be delivered somewhere else where, a rural area or whatever it might be? So if that's on the edge, then they're getting a close to same experience versus having to wait for that content to be downloaded.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but it's just, here's the whole page, static with the front page. I guess I was assuming that one advantage that eventually we were giving with more, maybe for those client side rendering components, but it was actually rendering on server side. So that it's as if it was static out of the CDN, and that's why it would do that.
Yeah, I think in that with that phased rendering that it does as well, that's what's getting you really fast performance, which I don't know if something like Fastly could do that necessarily straight out of the box. Yeah. Okay, so that's document-based authoring. Next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the universal editor. So this is through what's called Project Crosswalk that we're able to do this. Universal editor aims to be a little bit more of a CMS agnostic front end. So it's another way that you can author, and then you can also author this. It's WYSIWYG, meaning that you can see the changes, sort of as you're making them in line. You get all of the AEM features obviously as well, but the difference is the editor that we're going to see here in just a second. So let me start this video. So this is a typical AEM experience. You're going into AEM, you go to a page, and when you have this instrumented, then when you edit the page, it actually opens up Universal Editor as opposed to opening up the standard out of the box editor that's part of AEM. It's very extensible. You can have this rail where you can do things like integrate with Workfront. You can integrate with, generating variations as well. You can see that when you hover over different sections, and then you click on that particular section, it will bring up a specific component in that right rail and let you make modifications to it. You can also make inline modifications. You can browse the component hierarchy, just like you do in AEM. You can move things around in that component hierarchy. And again, you can make changes in line. You can also access your assets. So if you have assets, you can bring those in from your assets implementation. Really simple editing. I mean, the components are much more simplified than what you would have in something like AEM. Just making a really simple change again in Universal Editor, and I'm going to go ahead and publish that out. And there's also a preview mode. So when you preview it, then it just removes all the component and the authoring part of it, and then you can preview it as if you were actually on the site. There's a couple of different components that you have here too. Here's where we're just moving content up and down. We can move it around. Depending on what the image is, an image can be a simple image, or you can have an image which is part of something like a carousel. So you'll have different options there too. Okay, so that was a simple publish. Just gives you an indication that the content was published. There's also what are called content drafts. So you can create a draft of a particular part of the content. So this way you don't have to publish it out. You can create a draft, and it's basically a way that you can save it for later. A lot of times when you work on something like an editor in AEM, Universal Editor, or even an AEM, it makes a change directly to the page as you're working on it, right? This way you can save drafts. So that's kind of a newer feature that they've enabled here too. And then here's an image component that we're going to be working with. Just a couple of different ways that you can make modifications to different kinds of components. Like I said, image, rich text, straight text headlines. They can come up in a modal. Again, pretty simple editing.
pages, the typical AEM templates way, but then integrate universal editor to do the more real-time editing without going into AEM.
Yeah, that's a great question. The question was, do people build out experiences using standard AEM components, so things like core components, and then go into making use of universal editor? So there is some development work that has to happen there. You can use either one, really. So the way I see it is that the universal editor is a pretty simple one that I think most people can probably catch on to. But again, if you're doing something a little bit more complex or you have more complex layouts, then you might have to work with something like AEM standard, I think. I think what they're trying to do too is they're trying to cover for kind of 80-20. So they're trying to cover for 80% of the use cases when it comes to authoring. And then if there's that remaining 20, right, then that's probably something where something custom has to be built.
I think it's also possible to have like hardware side document base and hard. So like base.
That's pretty common too. So the comment was a lot of times you'll have both document-based authoring and traditional AEM authoring. That's a pretty common use case too. And what I've seen organizations do is they'll have their blog articles done with document-based authoring, because blog articles and any kind of article are a pretty good use case for document-based, and then have other more complex scenarios done with something like AEM. Yep. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yes.
So that's an interesting scenario. Sway away from that solution. Does if you were to author both publishing to the edge, not publishing to a traditional publisher, right? Definitely so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's document based or universal editor based, so it's still publishing to the edge. The edge, yeah. And from what I understand, it's better to get against the publish instance.
That's interesting. So like, remember, anything you're authoring here, it's getting stored back as content fragments, right? Then publish out to the publisher and then edge network.
So when you're publishing this out, what happens is that it does get published from as if you were on AEM Author and publishing it out to publish instances, but it's AEM's a cloud service, right? So it's a little bit of a different sort of architecture than something like AEM on-prem, which is you've got an author and then you have specific published instances that you're replicating out to. So this is more of a distribution as opposed to publishing to publish instances. I mean, it still kind of is behind the scenes, but it's a distribution sort of framework.
No one's going to have to go where you approve you're doing it right.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
I thought of for me, in the main use case, I didn't have to universal editor. It was more like a React app, something where you didn't create AEM templates, and kind of plug in the hooks for the universal editor and headless, kind of fragments. When I save in a universal editor, it's saving my fragment, and some React developer didn't have to know anything about AEM, but they would build an app on JS.
It can work like that too, and that's a common use case. So the not so much question but comment was, you're working in universal editor and then you're saving the content out to, and you're working like in a content fragment and saving that content fragment. It's saving that in the authoring environment, which is great because then you have the front end experience built on top of that, which they don't necessarily have to know, right, that's been published. Yep. Cool. Other questions before I go on?
No, just thanks for the other use cases.
Yeah. Okay, anybody hear about Project Dark Alley? No? Okay. So this is relatively new. It's actually experimental, and it was put together internally at Adobe to account for some of the specific use cases that they had. So what they were doing is they were modifying and updating and authoring a bunch of content in SharePoint. And instead of having the sort of nuances in SharePoint and some of the challenges of working in SharePoint, what they wanted to do, they wanted to provide like a new experience in authoring that content. So what they did is that they put together this Project Dark Alley. And what Project Dark Alley is you can have a edge delivery services site, and then the mount point points to their instance of this DA.live, as it's called. And what happens then is that as opposed to actually updating SharePoint documents behind the scenes, what they're doing is they're using custom APIs and they're updating S3. So there's actually documents that are in S3 that they're updating. And then again, the custom API is what is reading and writing that data. Okay. The really neat thing about Project Dark Alley is that it's bringing more and more feature parity of these authoring experiences to ways of authoring in edge delivery, right? I think that they're going to get to more and more feature parity, obviously, and part of their roadmap. And I'll show you what the roadmap is with their edge delivery services. But it's pretty fantastic. These documents can be previewed. They can be, published. You can work collaboratively in them. So the demo that I saw where we were working in a page is that, kind of like in a Microsoft Office document where you see people when the cursors in a specific area of text. So we had like 50 people in there at one time. So it was pretty amazing that you can, work collaboratively on a document like that. So it's pretty interesting. They've got translation tools built into it now too, and they've got some import tools. The demo that I saw when they imported content was bringing about 5,000 pages in, and it was in under a couple of minutes. I mean, it was pretty impressive how fast they've got this working. They had used SharePoint previously to do document-based authoring
They use the documents that were
in SharePoint. Right.
pages.
Yep. Did you have a question?
Yeah, from your understanding, how far are they along to commercialize this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it's still going to be a little ways. What I do know is that they're looking for customers to partner with and have this as sort of VIP program so that they can work with them to build it out in this experience. So, if there's any candidates that I think they'll be willing to work with you on that.
Discussion. So they hadn't built in security for in dark alley. That was under.
I did see administration that you can update in here. I don't know if it's completely secured in the way that you're thinking of just yet. That I'm not sure. That's right. So let's see. Let's play it here. So I'll just play a quick demo here too. So I have my repository set up and it's configured to point to Dark Alley. So I go into my repository and then I can go in there and you can browse folders. Obviously, you have the breadcrumbs that show the content. You can go to a particular page. I'll open up that page for editing. You can do your other usual operations. You can copy it, move it, delete it. Okay, so I had built the edge delivery site based on a boilerplate just a couple of minutes before starting this video, by the way. So building a site again is really, really fast. So in this case, again, I'm doing some simple editing. I'm modifying some text, adding some text. You can see it's a little bit of a different authoring experience. You get this toolbar on the left-hand side where you can apply certain treatments to it. You can insert things like blocks and icons, and you can navigate to assets and bring assets in. So all that's sort of built in. You can add dividers. You can add columns. So there's columns in there too that you can make. I think tables were always sort of a difficult thing to work with in something like AEM, but this makes them much easier. You got undo, redo, right?
So you create those different blocks, then you're ingesting like 5,000 documents. What's doing the mapping of this part of the document goes into this block and so forth.
Yeah, so what's doing the mapping with the blocks? That actually is in their import tool, and I believe that there's mappings that you can have in a spreadsheet to understand what needs to go where.
And H3 goes into.
Right. So now we're previewing this site, right? And one of the interesting things that I saw here is that you can have this preview come up side by side with the document-based authoring, and then the actual preview of the site, right? So that's something that that provided here too. So you can see that there's our previewed content. I'm gonna just add a little bit of text there on the left-hand side, and you can see that update right away on the right. So obviously this is a small screen. It'd be a lot better on a big screen. You can see that a little bit easier, but see how that change right there just took place right away, right? So that authoring is a you know, a little bit of a nicer experience. The other thing that they have here too that you can see, I'm gonna close out the preview, is versioning. So there you can see that there's all the different edits that have happened on that page, all the different versions that are in there. And then you can select one and go back to restoring that particular version. So it keeps pretty good track of the history of the editing of that page, which is kind of nice. I thought that was a really good feature. And you can see who made that change there too. And then again, typical preview it, publish it out. And there's my site. And you can see I got my sidekick up there too. So that's Project Dark Alley. Like I said, it was pretty impressive how it imported content. The ease of authoring in Dark Alley was pretty nice too.
Do you think that would effectively like replace like Google Docs and SharePoint if that goes GA? Like, would that be the preference?
If it goes GA, it probably would, yeah. Because once you have your docs in S3 and you're using those custom APIs to do that read write, then that's where they would live. Yeah. Would there be something like an export of them? Maybe, but I think right now they're just looking to import content into it. Yeah.
Is it your understanding that the virtual for this pulls from the JCR classic repository puts it here, or do you think once migrated over to base that we would frame import into the
So the question is, where is the import tool actually pulling the content from? So it will pull content from a Helix friendly site.
So there's no, in other words, it's not wasted effort to do it frame first. And if this
Right.
comes GA later.
Correct.
it's the natural progression.
Correct. That's right. Okay. Other questions, comments before I go on? Okay, so this is where we had the chance to play around with a commerce integration. So I'll play the video for you. It's really kind of the same thing as the document-based authoring. We actually used our original site that we created from Google Docs and Edge Delivery Services. So in this case, what we did is we, you know, it's just a regular site. In this case, what we did is we fixed some of the navigation, and when we built this out, we're actually using commerce in a headless way. So Edge Delivery Services is the sort of glass. And what we're doing is we're going to something like a product page listing, for example, right? So all that's coming from GraphQL queries. So this is all coming from an API. So images, the boilerplate that we use is a content and commerce boilerplate. So that's a template that you can use from Adobe to build out the experience. And it already comes with things like cart functionality, which is kind of neat. So it has that cart functionality in there. We also put in a logged in state. So you can log into this experience and you can see things like your wish list. Again, very performant. It's very fast. This is where we're just going to one of the product detail pages, and we can overwrite some of the content that's in here by working with a document in Edge Delivery or working in Google Docs. So that's supported there too. Pretty simple experience, but we did get that integration going. One of the other things that we have wanted to do for this is to integrate it with Experience Platform. So the different behaviors that are happening here. So for example, somebody adds their product to the cart and then abandons the cart, right? Well, we want to take that experience. We want to have it like send an email to that potential customer. Say, hey, you forgot something in your cart. You know, you've probably seen those kinds of emails before. So that's working with Experience Platform, something that we've been wanting to build out. So that was a commerce integration that we had done. And I think the rest of it is just, you know, making simple text changes and really else in that video. So any questions about the commerce integration?
I guess where do you enable and configure that? Is that in the commerce admin line, or is it the AEC, you know, new option in that console?
Yeah, so the question was, where is this enabled? Or how do you enable some of the integration between it?
Configuration.
Yeah, so there were a couple of services that had to be added on on the commerce side. I think there was a search service that had to be added there too in order for us to use some of the specific GraphQL capabilities. And I think that there's also what they're calling drop-ins on the commerce side that you can enable and then have that work then from edge delivery. But on the edge delivery side, what we had to do is we had to configure the GraphQL endpoint and then build out the different queries there. So that's how that worked.
Your experience with the drop-in, it's ready to be used, or are they still in a beta state?
It seemed like they were ready to use.
Okay.
Yeah, no concerns there.
Yeah, I just remember like looking at their documentation, probably a couple of weeks ago now, so maybe it's changed, but I know that some of their components were still sort of a work in progress, like account management, like authentication, things
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
I'm sure the more common stuff like any card running. So
Yeah, I mean, that's as far as we really went with that commerce integration was let's show product listings.
Yeah.
Let's show a product detail page. Let's do the add to cart functionality. Let's do the checkout functionality, right? That's the main thing that we want to accomplish with that. And then now take those events and bring those over into Experience Platform. But we haven't really gone beyond that. Not yet anyway.
I think some of our challenges. They were building up the experience, but type of organization, those products.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about development, right? I think this is probably a more fun topic for some of us who came from a development background, right? So the thing I wanted to talk about here was the approach to how experiences are built out. So I think, the model or design first approach is pretty common, and it's what, most of us have probably worked in. It's been my background for some time now, where you get designs and then those designs are handed off to development, and then developers, they will architect it and model it. And then content may come in. You may have some sample content that you build out, right? To make sure that your experiences work. You build those experiences and you deliver them. I think with edge delivery services, what they've sort of done is more of a content first approach. So what content do you have and where is it, right? A lot of times, as we said, it's in Google Docs, it's in Word docs, it's in SharePoint, right? So start there and then create your development and design, sort of in parallel with designing out that content. So, it's kind of in the spirit of agile. You're doing it a little more iteratively, right? You're getting experiences built out a little bit quicker. And the idea is to, have the lightweight modeling and thinking about, this is probably going to change at some point in the future. Like imagine having to do a redesign in the, upper part where it's, again, a very serial way to do it versus in the, approaching it from a content first sort of, approach.
The model or the top more familiar model, right? Like you have design and you have all this front end and back end code that lives in the repository, but with this other one with constant based approach first, can you still do all the same stuff that you're doing with and all the Java, all the HTML, CSS, of it, and then storing it in the same place? It's just coming the other way around first.
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Is the development the same? Like whatever development's going on in the more typical model. Is that still happening in this constant first approach? Just
So with a content first approach, how does the development change if it even does?
Yeah.
Well, I think the way that the approach is outlining here is that imagine on the top part, right, just sort of a traditional, design first approach. You would have to wait for those designs to be done or at least close to done with your acceptance criteria. And then you can start thinking about how you would build that out, right?
Yep.
But when you have a content first approach, you can just start developing and you can start developing, pretty quickly. You're still going to do similar kinds of developing, which is back end. You're going to start building out front end experiences. But at least what you can do with edge delivery services is you can get those experiences built out quickly and you can start having them work, like see them right away, right? Because you can just go to that particular feature branch, which is now in your URL, as opposed to having to wait for a long development cycle of at the end of sprint, whatever it is on this particular day, you can start building that out much quicker. I think that's the idea behind this content first approach is, work with the content first, build your development on top of that, or in parallel with the design, and then just get that out quicker. It's that rapid approach that lets you even do that. I don't know if that answered the question. I mean, there's still going to be some backend development. I think that, the technologies on edge delivery services, they're more JavaScript and CSS. So backend still has to be somewhere, right? And I think there's been a couple of different offerings in that area too. I think there's StreamX is one. For example, they have this mesh way of delivering some of those backend experiences. And you got AEM. Or App Builder, right? Yeah.
We found the original approach, building out AM components, but a new model building out framework blocks.
Right.
But if they start with the design, because you have to know what the block looks like. So I'm not sure I understand content first. Still, it's not like you can take any Word doc and then it renders the way the design.
That's true.
You have to need the design, you need to build the blocks, and you need to put that Word document in the blocks.
Yeah, you still do have to put it into blocks. It still does have to be authored a certain way, right? And
It takes training.
which takes training, some, yeah.
So
Yeah, it does, but I think the content first approach also lets you look at the content because it's got to exist somewhere. Like you can't just have a new site coming from nowhere, right? I mean, certainly it was either from documents or it was from some legacy site. There's probably a lot of different content sources for it. And that's the kind of the idea there is, what are those content sources? Do you have really lengthy Word documents or do you have PDFs? Are they scattered across different sources? Are there, in all different kinds of locations? So that's the thing to think about there too.
I guess like for like blocks. If you could have log pages where there are no blocks, it's more so just a flat structure. With the concept of model blocking.
It's typical. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds very WordPress.
Yeah.
It's like big instruments. Yeah,
Yeah.
like for those types of pages, I can see content existing much sooner before developing starts.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Yep. Other questions before we go on from the sort of philosophical approaches? Okay, so, again, rapid development, I think, this is just reiterating some of the stuff that I've talked about already. No learning curve, I don't know, I think there's less of a learning curve. You've got these really nice boilerplates that are available to you. You got boilerplates. These are basically GitHub templates with working code and content that lets you get started right away, right? I think they're pretty nice. They're pretty complete, at least. Giving you access to the RUM insights, as we talked about a little bit earlier. The other thing too I'll mention is that Adobe's been really good about making themselves available when we're working with edge delivery services, meaning there's the Discord channel, there's the Slack channel if you're a partner that you have access to Adobe. So you can ask some questions and you can get those answered pretty quickly. I really like that from the days of having to open up a support ticket and having to specify the severity of what you're dealing with and filling out all these different forms. And then, maybe you'll hear back depending on what your, SLAs are. So it's been really nice to be able to just, tap on their shoulder pretty quickly and easily. And I think they've been pretty intentional about that, which is great.
That continues.
Yeah, let's hope it continues. Yeah. So just wanted to go over some of the things that we learned in terms of working with edge delivery sites. So it's not a static site generator. You can use it as a headless CMS. You can use, for a headless CMS, but it can also render full HTML pages. We've kind of, determined that already. The other thing that we learned is the agility that you have with developing an edge delivery services. I mentioned pipelines, right? Imagine waiting, hours for a pipeline to complete. In some cases, we've got clients that wait, more than a day for a pipeline to complete, which is, it's kind of a lot, right? So at least, here when we're working with developing content and publishing the content, it's so fast. That's one thing that we learned pretty quickly too. With Project Crosswalk, as we said, you got universal editor and you get your content stored in AEM, but with document-based authoring, it's just in the documents. That's another thing that we learned. Make use of the real use monitoring. I think that's pretty important. And as I mentioned before, the content that you're deploying out is basically rendered in Markdown, so you can see it in the .md, so you can access your content with a .md, or you can access it with plain.html as well, so you can at least see what's out there on the edge that's being rendered. So it just helps with troubleshooting a little bit too. I've not seen any compatibility issues with it going to Markdown. Not yet, anyway. Yeah.
So I was just curious in the headless scenario, I think on the previous slide, it said you have.
Yeah, I can go back. There's a question about the headless scenario.
Yeah. So how do you query that? Is that really the query that's JSON endpoint? So like you have a document and you publish it and it's indexed by absolutely great. So how does a headless app actually get that JSON data? That makes sense.
I'm not following. So
So I'm looking at so in the middle column, the first row says content uploaded with us being aggregated to.
oh yeah, you would use the query index. That's right. That's right. And you can also access that markdown and you can do whatever you want with that markdown. Or
Gotcha.
like I said, the plain HTML, you can access that whatever way and then put your front end on top of that.
So does that, so querying that JSON endpoint, does that give you like all of the Word document content, or does it only give you like the metadata, entitled description? Or like, I wonder, like, do you have to explicitly define your query indexes so that it knows what types of content it's indexing?
Yeah, I think it is more the latter. It's not something that we played around with yet,
Gotcha.
but I'm guessing it's a little more the latter.
Yeah, from my experience, like out of the box, it's just indexing a couple of like metadata properties like title, description, tags, maybe some other metadata fields. But I believe there is a way to like extend or customize what it's indexing. If you want to include like a full body content on one page,
Yeah.
you could do that. I think it requires some custom configuration first.
Yeah, we've also learned that with edge delivery services, you can also have a metadata spreadsheet, and that metadata spreadsheet can sort of define what some of that information is that's coming out of the content. Yeah. Okay, what else? Obviously, we've determined that there's a number of authoring choices with edge delivery services. I was just talking about the metadata XLS that you can use, right? The sidekicks is extensible, so you can add additional buttons to do whatever you needed to do, which has been fantastic. That's one way that we integrated our assets into it, as well as the generate variations. If you haven't had a chance to play around with the generative variations, it's a lot of fun. If you're a partner, then you can get that for your sandbox. It's pretty neat to use AI with your content. Universal editor obviously is very flexible. Working with either your choice of AEM traditional editing or using the universal editor, it's great. And my understanding is that Edge Delivery Services is also available not just for sites and AEM as a cloud service, but it's also an add-on for commerce. And I understand it's also there for forms and assets. We have already integrated with assets, but we haven't really worked with forms too much. So I'm kind of curious to explore that a little bit too. All right, so just a couple of considerations. Just wanted to describe some use cases of when you want to consider edge delivery services. I'll say before I get into deep dive into any of these items, I think that edge delivery services should be one of your first considerations, should be one of the first things that you look at when you're building out your experiences, just because of the agility that you have with it, with development, with the ease of content authoring, and then with the performance of the performance that you have with your pages, right? It's probably something that I would look at first before looking at something like building it out in AEM, because that it takes a little while and you need resources for that, specialized resources to do that. So again, I would look at edge delivery services first. So when the content management needs are basic, right? If you need things like multi-site manager, if you need live copies, if you need launches, that kind of stuff, that's very AEM, then you probably need to use AEM, right? Um, you also look at what the expertise is of your authoring team. So if they're trained in AEM, obviously, then, AEM is probably a good choice. But if you have to ramp up a bunch of resources, then, consider Google Docs or Microsoft Word, and then build your experiences on top of that. The other thing too is that, I think we just talked about a little bit with the blocks, right? So if you need layout control, then that's going to be a little bit trickier with document-based authoring, obviously, right? You can probably build out a certain amount of experiences with it, but it's going to take some work. I think using something like the editable templates is pretty straightforward. You can build out your layouts there, which is kind of easy. It's kind of nice. If you have a lot of marketing landing pages, so if you have a lot of those, or if you have a lot of static content, then this is a really good candidate for building those out there because they have to be performant, right? But if you got something that's a little bit more, complex or a little bit more dynamic, I mean, you can build out, things like, React components and single page apps and such. But if you get something that's really complex, and also if you have complex security requirements, I know that you can already do things like, have a logged in state, but if you have really complex security requirements like closed user groups, right? How do you do that in edge delivery? That I've not found a way to do that. So that could be a case where you still have to use something like AEM. Any questions about the considerations?
So since it can use various data sources. Feels good. So,
Yeah, good.
well, and you brought up others. So content hub came out in June, right? G8 in June.
Content Hub, yeah.
Yeah, so you could push the up to content hub region. At least sometime in the near future should be able to have permissions attached to folder paths, you could do something like, or at least, yeah, your users in certain groups that have access to these folders, then your experience with internet services are going to be leverage that, but then, content is just stuff that isn't ready for you. So,
Yeah. Content Hub is relatively new, and it's not something that I've had a lot of experience with just yet because it's so new. But we've worked with things like Brand Portal, just similar assets, right? Okay. Any other questions before I continue?
Not a question, I like the point about control over layouts, like, yeah, there could be cases to go with like traditional AEM and the requirement is to have on a control over layout.
Yep.
I have seen cases though where client, like they abuse that, I've seen them like in their operating environment, they have like super users, effectively like just doing infinite, like just unlimited amounts of nesting of like container components, file control components, columns within columns, and they're creating their own layouts essentially in such a way that's really not adhering to any like design system, like basically the way that, they're breaking out of some way that the site just wasn't intended to actually behave. And we're actually migrating them to edge delivery now, so it's sort of a mindset shift because you have limited nesting within edge delivery, which I think can actually be a good thing because it just helps people that, provide some form of governance to ensure that they're not just creating their own layout, something like intended to exist in the first place.
Yeah, so the topic was around just, challenges with layouts versus, the control thereof. I think another consideration that I may not have listed here too, something that I came across recently is, let's just say that you have a link to a particular document, right? You've built that out. You have a link to a particular page, and now you change the name of that page. Well, in AEM, it's pretty nice because it takes care of that reference, right? It updates where it's being referenced. In the document-based authoring, I've not found that to be the case. So you may either have to go in and update all those references, or you would have to create a redirect, right? So when you're working with a lot of volume of content, that's something that you need to consider too. because you don't want to start having, a bunch of broken links out there. So something to think about. Okay, I'll go on if there's no other questions. So I just wanted to talk about governance and document-based authoring. Basically, what we're saying here is that, whatever access control, you're going to be doing that in the document-based system itself, right? So in Google Docs, you've got a certain amount of ways that you can control that. Similar with versioning. So versions are also going to be controlled within the document-based system and then workflows. The nice thing about Universal Editor that we found is that it does integrate with Workfront. So if you're a Workfront customer, then you can have that rail updated with the Universal Editor too. So you can have basically your status and you see your different flows and approvals and all that good stuff that comes out of Workfront in Universal Editor, which is good. So, okay, so I wanted to talk about a couple of additional topics. Definitely explore the site importer and the different migration tools that they have available. They're different between the site importer that's available on GitHub versus the one that's part of Project Dark Alley. So migration obviously is going to be a big one here too if you're looking to migrate a bunch of content over just between AEM sites and edge delivery, vice versa. Your GitHub repos, they can be either public or private. Initially, we thought that they had to be public, but that's not necessarily the case. You can't have private GitHub repositories, so it's not like your code is exposed to the public, right? I'm looking for more updates on the Sidekick as well. So, they're continuing to make updates on that extension, which is kind of nice. You can configure some of it obviously, but I think they're going to be making some more updates to it too. And then obviously logged in state and complex security requirements, CUGs, like we were talking about, something to consider. So I wanted to show you too the sort of future roadmap that we've seen from Adobe. So right now you've got accessibility enhancements that have been put in. There's moving components around containers, copy paste of components. What they're looking in the future, as I mentioned before, is that they're looking to support 6.5, right, for headless use cases anyway. So that means that it would be probably the content fragments, right? Undo and redo. MSM and launch support, I'm really looking out for that one. I think if they have feature parity there, that would be a huge step in being right there with AEM. So something else that they're looking at, collaborative editing with third-party persistence plugins, plugins for content stored in the documents, and then supporting all the core components. So on the roadmap, which is good. This is just a link to some of the resources that they have made available. I recommend going on Discord, and if you're a partner, definitely be on Slack, so you can reach out to them pretty quickly there too. There's a link for Discord. There's da.live, so that's the dark alley. You can go right to that too and start working with that, start building there. Also, they've got a YouTube channel, which is kind of nice. So they've been posting these videos that are on the YouTube channel. They're pretty informative too, so definitely check those out if you haven't already. If you got questions, and there's specific topics that they cover there too, which is great. A couple of sites there too if you're their product owner, if you're in marketing, and then again Slack and using some of the Adobe enablement in the solution partner portal. They've got a good amount of training there too. I think last I looked there was like 90 hours worth, so a lot of good training. And then there's my info, so QR code. I'm up proficient. We got a great team here, so we were pretty excited to host this too. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. It's been informative, right? Hopefully, yeah. Thank you. All right, I think it's time to go out on the terrace, right?
We've got food and drinks.
Yeah.
Any questions for Shay? Have a chat.
Oh, let me see. There are any.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yep, thank you.
All right, see you later.
No, I think we're good with questions. I'll stop the recording now too.
Have you seen this power? Yes. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We do have a question. Is that your picture you took there, background?
Why?
Question is this my picture? Yeah, that was when my wife and I went to
Oh.
Como, Italy, And that was from an Airbnb balcony. So yeah, it's
Okay,
got that picture.
that's
just at
fine,
the right
man.
time.
Just raise a ticket, incident ticket from your end and send me to you. Send me my email address, okay? Hello? Yeah,
So
just,
unmuted.
just, you know,
Okay.